which whom is a manifestation of God and the Father, right? Well, this week I'd like to talk a little bit about the I am and the relevance to the I am in our lives today. Let me first just by talking about in Revelations when God says, I am the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning, and the end. Basically, he's saying I was, he always was, always am, and always going to be. To put it quite simply. He's the author and finisher of our faith, the provider when we need provision, the healer when we need healing, the source of stability when we're shaken. Basically, he is all things to all people, for all generations, for all mankind. Genesis clearly states that let us make man in our own in our image, clearly implying or making a profound statement there is more than one. There's more than one nature involved, even in the creation of the world as we know it today and live within it at the present. John says in chapter 1, he was with God and the Word was God. Notice the language change used by John, making the word personal when he changed the word from word to he. Then further saying he was God in the beginning, through him all things were made, and has been made, without him nothing has been made. Remember last week when we said that the already existing word, God's spoken word and truth and the life in the Old Testament was powerful self-expression in creation, revelation, and salvation? God sent Jesus personifying, thank you. That word is God's ultimate disclosure of God. The Word is distinct from God, but enjoys a personal relationship with God. In other words, it's God's revelation of his different natures. God's own peers and God's own self describing Jesus as fully God. Right?
Right.
Okay. So if you turn with me to John 14, 6 and 7, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him because you have seen me. I believe Jesus at that point anoints the disciples with the willingness to be able to receive Jesus as a manifestation of the Father, and then as a manifestation of the Father. And then a couple verses later, in verse 9, Jesus tells Philip, don't you know me? Anyone that has seen me has seen the Father. And then the next verse, in verse 10, he says, Jesus says, I do not speak on my own authority, rather it's the Father living in me who is doing his work. Finally, Jesus says in verse 11, believe me when I say I am in the Father and the Father is in me. So believing that Jesus is the exact representation of the Father, or the exact representation of the Father of God through Jesus, wouldn't it be safe to believe that coming to the Father is coming to the Father through the manifestation of God? In other words, coming to the Father through the manifestation of God himself. That would mean coming to God is through God. Which takes quite the big burden off of us. Because it's not us that are capable of doing it. So many times when you hear in the Bible where they say, many are called, few are chosen. Well, you become chosen because of your willingness to be obedient through your faith. So, if we continue in John 14:6, when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, is not he telling us that it's the only way to the Father is through him? Now, some belief systems believe that life is suffering. And the only way to enlightenment or their form of salvation is within themselves. It's achieved through karma. And actually, their enlightenment, their salvation, their end is non-existence. So the only way that they, in their suffering, the only way that they find fulfillment in their life is virtually being non-existent within themselves, which is achieved by their worldly actions, which creates karma, affecting their rebirths according to their actions. It doesn't sound like much hope to me. In fact, that would be kind My whole purpose, my hope in life is to be existed to nothing. But Jesus is describing a holy way. Jesus representing the gospel of grace is describing through him a way that we are incapable of achieving except through our willingness to receive his grace through our faith. Now faith can be both a noun and a verb, as Christ being all things to all people. And basically placing faith as a noun, wouldn't that mean that faith is Christ? As he's all things to all people in all generations. But I'm going to explain it in a better way as a verb, an action word. James says faith without works is dead. So what is James saying when he speaks of works? Well, I believe he's relating works with our willingness to receive Christ as a Messiah, resulting in the obedience to the Father. I believe that our works is our willingness to receive Jesus as a Messiah and God as the one true God who sent Jesus as a mediator who perfectly expresses the Father's words and deeds. I believe works is also when we are obedient to Christ and we have the willingness to go out to help others, to exert the love of God to others, to express what God has through us for everyone. I believe that works. I don't believe that that's part of digging a ditch. I don't believe that we can do anything that we would actually call work. So when Jesus says, I am the way, he is saying through our faith in him and our willingness to believe, and through the Father's grace we have been chosen, through that willingness, because of his love for us and his desire to be in relationship with us, we may achieve salvation and life eternal with the Father. So really, our part of it is faith. But there's one other thing. You know, let me, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but I believe there's a difference in beliefs and there's a difference in faith. And we'll get on to that here in a minute. So now we figured out the way. The way is not through us. The way is impossible for our own self. The way is through Christ, and that's the only way because he's already done the work on the cross. So our physical actions aren't necessary. But now let's talk about truth, because it's the way, the truth. So what is truth? Well, psychology classes around the world tell you that truth is achieved from one's perception becoming the reality, thus forming their truth or belief system in one's life. So truth really would be one's perception of the reality in which a person believes. Now, belief systems can be as simple as, I believe if I flip on that light switch over there, these lights will come on. But the reality is the truth doesn't occur until the light actually comes on. And because believing by turning the switch on, we physically move, which then turns into faith, and the truth comes when the light actually comes on. Resulting in a person actually moving to flip a switch. Resulting in a person actually to move in obedience with Christ. See, the funny thing about faith is, and we're going to go back to the way, but the funny thing about faith is, you would almost have to say you have to have faith to get faith. And then even faith comes from God, so it doesn't come from us. So really we can't even take credit for faith that God's already given us. In fact, I can't really think of a whole lot of things that we can actually take credit for. Because our peace, hope, love, and joy also comes through anointing of God and our willingness, but it's through God. So really, the way to anything that we really have is through Christ, to begin with. Anyway, so what is truth of God as it relates to us? Now, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to be honest with you right off the top here. If you ever run into a church and the pastor says, you know what, I know every truth, I know every revelation, I know everything there is about God, I got one solid bit of advice for you. To get up sharply, pray towards the exit, get in your car and pray all the way home. Seriously. Because there's so many aspects of God, there's so many natures of God, there's so many things God does that our mind can't even wrap our heads around. So that's just a bit of advice. But I'm going to give you just a little bit of truth. Just a little bit of truth that I've come to understand, and it's helped in my understanding of who Jesus is. Okay? Now, the understanding of Romans 8:3 is crucial because God, doing what the law weakened by the flesh could not do, sent his Son in likeness of sinful flesh to be a sin offering and excluding his sin from him. He condemned sin in the flesh. A key word in that is likeness, because you have to understand likeness. It's important to understand because the word likeness means similar, not exact, because Jesus could not be sinful. He excluded his sinfulness, not his identity as a human. So he kept his identity as a human, but he excluded his sinfulness. So as we can see, Christ revealed as being the same with God, although he did not consider himself equal in the form of humanity, but not excluding the equality with God. Now Philippians 2:7 says, but he emptied himself humbly, taking on the form of a servant in external form. Therefore, not excluding his identity as a man, but a sinful man. So you say, wait a minute, wait. What do you mean he emptied himself? What does that mean? What did he empty himself of? Well, that's where it gets really interesting to me. Because I believe he didn't empty himself of his deity. But I believe he did empty himself of the glory that he internally possessed while he was with the Father, and able to become incarnate to interact with people. See, remember when Moses stood next to his glory, his hair turned white? I want you to imagine now, what would happen if Jesus came to earth in human form, kept all his glory, and then interacted with mankind? It could be like, hey, look, there's Jesus right there. Oh, too much. So Jesus, out of his grace and his love, decided on his own accord to hold back some of his glory, not his deity, his glory, so that he could effectively communicate with humanity. And I believe this because right before he was crucified, he prayed to the Father in John 17:5. He said, Jesus says, Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory I once had with you before the world existed. So he's asking God, he's asking God again, he's asking his Father, hey, when this is done, I want all my glory back. Can you please give it all back? Because I chose to give that up. I would say there's a kind of glory Jesus set aside, however. In Hebrews, it says he brings some of his glory with him, but leaves his prerogative to be with the Father, the prerogative to be with the Father and enjoy a triangular relationship with the Father, become incarnate as servant. As an obedient servant. As an obedient servant, even unto the cross. Because he loved us so much. I'm trying to hurry. The truth is in Jesus our incarnate, becoming the likeness of man, came to earth for the redemption of sin and humanity by shedding of his blood, paying the ransom for us so we may have a relationship with God for eternity. Again, it's not our own physical capability for achieving this. It is through faith in Christ, as Romans 10:9 and 10:10 says, that if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and you're justified, and it's with your mouth that you profess your faith. I'm hurrying. I'm
going to shut you down in like 30 seconds. So.
Okay. Well, then I'll just shut it down. So now we know kind of the way we kind of know the truth, right? Because of the way we know the truth, and because of the truth we know the way. But next week we're going to pick up what the life is. And that's the exciting part is the life, because he says he's the way, the truth, and the life. But without the way and the truth, we wouldn't have no life in here, right?